Pretty much every day when I was a child, I watched The Amanda Show. If I remember correctly, we used to have a double bill of The Amanda Show, followed by a double bill of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and then it was a double bill of Keenan and Kel. If I remember correctly, that was from 6 till 9 o'clock at night. And I loved this show. But in hindsight, I remember it being very silly juvenile humour, which is exactly what it is. It's basically slapstick comedy. And for me, that is not something that I enjoy that much. So I thought I would go back and watch the first episode and see if I could rekindle the elements that made me enjoy it when I was younger. And I have to say, having watched this first episode, I'm basically going to give you a breakdown of the type of sketches in this and what the style of humour was like. But what I've realised is that, yes, it's very juvenile humour, but it's fantastically acted. And Amanda Bynes, we need to remember she was 13 at the time, and her acting range is phenomenal. I haven't seen her in anything in quite a few years now, but really, really fantastic performance from her. And that's something that I think I probably didn't pick up on when I was younger, because unless you are a child actor or you go to drama club or anything, you maybe don't necessarily realise just how talented a particular actor or actress is. And that's the first thing that I want to say. Regardless of whether this is silly humour or anything like that, I think Amanda Bynes gave an absolutely fantastic performance. At least in this first episode, her acting range is fabulous. And for a 13-year-old to have that confidence, that level of skill, really impressive. I don't know what her background in acting is. I don't know if she's been going to acting lessons since she was a young child. Feel free to let me know if you do know that. But whatever it is, absolutely brilliant. The episodes, the shorts, yes, they are kind of silly humour and they don't take themselves seriously. And I imagine some of the adult actors who'd been cast in the sketches were maybe thinking, I got myself into several $1,000s of debt going to acting school for this. But at the same time, if you're making children happy with it, that's not a bad thing. This first episode was released in October 1999. I would have guessed it to have been about 2001, 2002, so it's actually a little older than I thought. And the first episode is directed by Tim O'Donnell and Ken Whittingham, and it actually sets us up really well. So I am going to give you a breakdown of the episode, but I won't spoil anything about the intricacies of each sketch. But it starts off with Penelope Tate, please, trying to get into the studio because she's Amanda's #1 fan, please. And she has her own Amanda website, please, www.amandaplease.com. Unfortunately, that no longer exists. I remember a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago now actually, I did try to go on it and the website still exists, but it now just redirects to the Nickelodeon website. But if you go onto Wayback Machine, I expect you can probably see it, and I might actually do a separate video on that. But anyway, while Penelope Tate, please, is trying to get into the studio, Amanda is actually in a helicopter, running late, trying to get to the studio, and we get to actually see the studio as well, impatiently waiting for Amanda. And I like that it's kind of breaking the fourth wall almost, not directly talking to us, but showing us the behind the scenes, allowing us to realise that this is a TV show within a TV show, and that's something that I found worked really well. And then it cuts to the cartoon intro, and I have to say that that intro is one of the most iconic from my childhood. We all have those TV themes, those TV intros that stick with us, and unquestionably, the intro to The Amanda Show is one that I will never ever forget. If you used to watch The Amanda Show and you haven't seen the intro in a while, go and check it out. I promise it will just flood you with nostalgia. And then after that, we get Keenan and Kel bringing her flowers, which I thought was a lovely touch. And then finally, the sketches do kick in. And the first one is one that I remember loving. Not this specific sketch, but I used to love the fake adverts, the fake commercials. This one is an advert for a pedestrian airbag from the makers of the Inflatable Friend. And it's an advert for an airbag that you wear on your chest. And it shows us the different scenarios where that could be utilised. And yep, it's pretty much setting us up for how ludicrous the entire show is. Then we have one of what I consider to be the most iconic sketches, and that's Judge Trudy. of course, a parody on Judge Judy. Did I know who Judge Judy was at the time? I don't think so. I think there's a very good chance that I knew of Judge Trudy before I knew of Judge Judy. But I think it's an interesting thing that they're parodying a show that's aimed at adults. It works quite well, though. In this particular one, there's a moment with this kid played by Drake Bell who is up against his principal. Of course, we have the iconic dancing lobsters at the end. It's a lot of fun. The next sketch is nightmare-inducing. Amanda is at school, and then the scene transforms into these very grotesque-looking puppets as Amanda tries to get rid of her teacher, and there's some very random sheep in this. These puppets they will stay with you for life. They are so disturbing. Then you have the Klutz family, whose catchphrase is "not a problem." And basically, they start off by spilling some things, and then they break some things, and then they're a real danger to their own lives. But it's not a problem. And it's ludicrous. And that's kind of the sketch where I looked at the adult actors and thought, how much did you pay for your education in acting, and this is what you're doing? But again, if it entertains children, it's not a bad thing. It's still worthy. But I'm sure that, it's not necessarily what they wanted to be doing. But, that aspect of it just means I get to have a different viewpoint. And I get to enjoy different aspects of it as an adult. But I know the Not a Problem family were definitely quite popular. And then there's one that I actually really remember really well, and I remembered this when I started watching it. I thought, this is stuck in my mind, for better or worse. Amanda and Drake Bell are playing characters who are on a very posh, sophisticated date in a very classy restaurant. It's quite amusing because they're obviously children, but they are discussing the ballet and Mozart, and then all of a sudden Amanda begins to show traits of being a little less than sophisticated. It starts off with her scratching an armpit with a fork, and then it just gets progressively worse. And I won't spoil the details of it, but it is a very disturbing sketch, and one that has definitely stuck with me. Mother Caboose is one that I have no memory of Mother Caboose, which is obviously parody on Mother Goose, reading a bedtime story, the language that she uses, and the violent nature of her words. It's not necessarily what you'd expect from a Mother Goose-esque story, so that's meant to be entertaining. I don't have any recollection of that. So I don't know if it's the case that Mother Caboose didn't really feature that often in the show, or if I've just mentally blocked it out. But I didn't think it was that. Compared to the rest of them, I thought it was a bit of a weak link. And then towards the end of this first episode, Amanda is back in front of her audience. I like that. I like that it doesn't just end abruptly with a sketch. It's bringing everything full circle and allowing us to feel like we are there in the audience. And that's an aspect that I thought worked really well. In this one, she's been tasked to name all 50 states backwards while punching an astronaut. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. And to be honest, I just realised this was over 20 years ago. This is insane. I don't think this would ever be made today. Not like this. I don't think they'd get away with it. Everything's far too PC today, and that's kind of one of the enjoyable things about watching this, is that nobody's getting harmed by this, except the people in the sketches. But I just don't think Nickelodeon would ever make this today. I don't even know if they show reruns of the Amanda Show. I can't imagine they do. I'd love to know if you have seen the Amanda Show, but you were much younger than the target audience were at the time. So if you have watched it, but you were maybe born after, let's say, 1999, I guess, if you were born after the show was made, what do you think of it? Does it still work? Does it still appeal to younger people? Or is it very much a product of its time? Part of me thinks it's a product of its time because it's not allowed to be a product of today. It is quite shocking. And it is un-PC in a lot of ways. But that's one of the reasons why I kind of like going back and watching it, because it reminds me of a time when you could say things that weren't, you could do things and say things that wasn't going to hurt anybody. And that was okay. And it was just fun, innocent, ludicrous art. And I thought Amanda Bynes was brilliant in this first episode. Really diverse acting range for the 13-year-old. I really liked it. I wouldn't enjoy it now if I didn't have the nostalgic aspect. I definitely wouldn't like it today. But going back on it, it takes me to a time when things were easier not just because I was a child, but because people didn't get offended by everything. And people are just so easily offended today. And it's just ridiculous. And you just need to watch this to know that actually some of us grew up with this kind of thing and we weren't offended. And nobody's really getting offended by this. And it's just a shame that this kind of thing can't be created today. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Nickelodeon does show it and they don't get angry letters and everything's fine. But I would just predict that if Nickelodeon either recreated something like this today or they showed reruns of this every day, I just don't think it would go down too well. Which is a shame because as silly and ludicrous as it is, it's actually very well crafted.